Good afternoon, dear panelists. Good afternoon, listeners. Welcome. And we are going to present our paper, our completed paper for today. But before that, let me first give you an inspiring quotation, which is related to the completed lesson that we have. So, this is actually from Wilkins, 1972, cited by Zhang in 2016. So, the quotation says, without grammar, very little can be conveyed. Without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. So, in our study, we are going to focus on the essence or the importance of the vocabulary. And the title goes like this: Social Network and Students' Vocabulary Proficiency of Second Language, Basis for Reading Enrichment Method. The proponents of this study are Miss Maricar S. Dimla, Miss Marilet C. Eusebio, Mr. or Engineer Felix Pascua Jr., and yours truly, Miss Annalisa Z. Mendoza. So let's analyze the variables of the study. So we have the independent variable, which is the social network exposure. And we also have the dependent variable, which is the second language or L2 vocabulary proficiency. So, before we go to the discussion of the results and, of course, the question of the study, let me first clarify some important words or important terms that you will come across in our study. So, the first one is the social network. So, it's a social network is a web-based services that allow individuals to construct a public or semi-public profile within a bounded system. That's from Boyd and Ellison of 2007. Also, vocabulary refers to the knowledge of words as well as the meaning of words. And lastly, the second language or L2 is a language that is not the native language or the first language or what we call the L1 of the speaker. So the second language or L2 is something that you actually learn. Okay, now why did we come up or how did we come up with a study like this? So there is an existing study. This is from Zihong 2000, cited by Subekti and Lawson in 2007. A student's limited vocabulary is a significant barrier to learning a foreign language. Research has highlighted the importance of frequent exposure to vocabulary words, specific instruction and learning strategies, and sufficient time to engage with new words. So, even there is a barrier or a significant barrier to learn a new language because of the limited vocabulary, it is still possible to overcome those barriers or that barrier if we are going to expose ourselves to the vocabulary of those specific languages. And another thing, from a global average of 4.4 hours a day, this is actually the average exposure of people to social network, okay, in the internet. And locally here in the Philippines, a Filipino spends an average of 6.3 hours a day online via laptop or desktop and 3.3 hours a day via mobile phones. And moreover, 40% of Filipinos own an active social media account. So this is from the Asia Digital Marketing Association of 2015. So, because of that, we came up with a study that it is actually possible that we can use the social network or the internet for us to be exposed in acquiring a new language. However, of course, the study came across with different research gaps. Okay, so let's start with those of the positive things related to social network and internet. So first from Zainal and Ramad of 2020. Okay, so various social networking sites like Facebook and YouTube and the others are already integrated as learning tools, especially nowadays in this time of the global pandemic. Another from Al Harthi, as cited by Al Faki of 2014, for foreign language acquisition, social networking sites are actually more successful than the traditional learning. And then also from Direction 2019, okay, and Young 2017, and Mutum and Wang in 2010. These are all actually related literature that says that because of the contents of the social networking sites, memes, comments, popular articles, these are already becoming very useful for the people to learn new ideas, to learn new words, and even to learn another language. Primarily, maybe it's English language, uh, when they are actually exposed to these different media platforms or social media platforms. However, okay, we also have some of the negative things about social media. Like, for example, text messaging has reduced words to letters. Okay, so the spelling is no longer the exact spelling of those words, and then even the phrases are not completely written as the original spelling, right? And also the abbreviations of words, because, for example, in Twitter, you are only allowed to have limited number of characters for you to express what you want to say. So abbreviations of words are there. But okay, it's an evolution, we can say. It's an evolution of words or evolution of language. But the problem is not all people know these kinds of abbreviations, especially those people who are not exposed to that specific social networking site. So what happened is that there has been some misunderstanding and of course some misinformation because of these abbreviations. Okay. Also, there are some useful social networking sites, for example, for grammar, for spelling, like that. But of course, they correct you if you have an incorrect grammar, but the thing is they do not really explain why it was actually not correct, unless of course you are using a premium account. But of course, if you don't have the luxury to own a premium account, definitely you won't be able to know why it is not accepted as a correct one, or why it is an incorrect thing in terms of grammar. And lastly, we have to face the reality that nowadays social networking sites are used for learning tools, but before, let's be realistic that most of the time social networking site is just for entertainment purposes, for non-academic purposes. So with all of those research gaps, the researchers came up with the statement of the problem. The main focus of the study was to determine the relationship between the learner's exposure to social network platforms and their vocabulary level as basis for designing and reading enhancement program. Specifically, the researchers studied about: number one, how can the exposure to social media platforms of the learners be described in terms of number of social network accounts they owned, number of hours the students spend browsing social networks, and number of reasons in using social network accounts. Number two, what is the level of the second language or L2 vocabulary proficiency of the students? And lastly, does the exposure to social media platforms significantly relate to the second language or L2 vocabulary proficiency? So, and the last one is the reading enhancement program that may be proposed based on the findings of the study. So now I may give the virtual floor to the next presenter, Miss Maricar Dimla.
Thank you for that, Miss Annalisa Mendoza. And to move forward, our respondents were the grade 7 from one of the Catholic schools around Bulacan, Philippines, with a total population of 103. And to showcase our research method, which is a descriptive correlational, we utilize two research instruments. The first one is a validated and reliable instrument that has been used by other researchers with a Cronbach's alpha of 0.8, while the other one is a standardized instrument to measure the vocabulary proficiency of our respondents. And to keep our data at utmost confidentiality, we observe the following ethical considerations. The first one, the Republic Act number 10170, or also known as the Data Privacy Act of 2012. And we sought permission from proper authority through the school heads. Next, we sent letter to the students' school advisors while the participants were notified through an informed consent form. And then lastly, the questionnaires were distributed to the respondents via Google Forms since face-to-face interaction was limited due to the COVID-19 restrictions. And to give answers in our SOP that has been mentioned a while back, we simplify them to maximize our limited time. So, the specific question number one, how can the exposure to social media platforms of the learners be described in terms of 1.1, number of social network accounts owned, 1.2, number of hours the students spend browsing social networks, and 1.3, number of reasons in utilizing those networks account. And the findings, an average grade 7 student has 4 social networks account, spend 4 hours a day excluded their actual screen time in studying, and has 5 reasons of utilizing them. And for the specific question number 2, what is the level of the second language vocabulary proficiency of the students? The findings, with a G-score of 6.01, the respondents' level of vocabulary was grade 6 going to grade 7. Again, our respondents here were the grade 7. And for the SOP specific question number 3, does the exposure to social media platforms significantly relate to the second language vocabulary proficiency? We use the word relate here because we want to determine the relationship between our two variables. And the findings, with a zero point zero 0.01 indicator of significant correlation, it was found out that the coefficient value of number of social media owned is negative 0.066 and number of reasons of using them is negative 0.05, or rather negative 0.075, which shows no significant correlation with the G-score or the vocabulary level of the respondents. However, in hours of exposure, there is a significant relation with a correlation coefficient value of 0.020. And to have a interpretation and recommendation plus the conclusion of our study, let's hear out Miss Marilet Eusebio, one of my co-authors. Thank you.
Now, let me summarize the big ideas that Miss Dimla have discussed to you. Nawala yung presentation. Ayan. So, as for the data interpretation, here are the big ideas that we have come up in the whole course of the study. First is that we found out that a global average of social media exposure is 4.4 hours a day. So this was from a related literature and from Asia Digital Marketing Association of 2015, which supports our or the result of our study. Next idea is that Filipinos, particularly the youth, are spending too much time using social media, having 3 to 4 active social media platforms. This was from Granada 2017, in which it also supports the result that we have gathered from our study. And lastly, students tend to use social networking sites mainly for non-academic purposes, for a fact that they consider it mostly as a social platform, said by Nizebekov 2012. With that being said, here are the conclusions of our study. So first is that we researchers have found out that social media networks aren't primarily viewed as educational platform. Thus, it is viewed as um, or it is utilized for entertainment purposes only, especially when the students are looking for memes, watching funny and satisfying videos, as well as when they are responding to trending posts of their favorite celebrities or favorite internet sensation. Secondly, social media platforms are normally viewed as communication tools, especially nowadays that we are experiencing pandemic. And face-to-face interactions are very limited with each other. And lastly, we have found out that only few of our respondents are utilizing their social media accounts for reading informational text. So secondly, for our conclusion, we researchers have found out that the average mean for the subvariables number 2, which is the number of hours spent in browsing social media platforms, were found to have a significant relationship to the vocabulary proficiency of the students. On the other hand, the two other subvariable mentioned on our statement of the problem, which are the number of social media accounts owned by the students and the number of reasons on why they are utilizing their platforms, have found to have no significant relationship with the vocabulary proficiency of the students. And lastly, based on the McCall-Krabs test results facilitated by the researchers and answered by our respondents, we have found that the grade 7 students has a reading ability of a grade 6 student. And that's why it is significant to implement a reading enhancement program. So with that being said, since I've mentioned to you the reading enhancement program, here are the recommendations of our study in which we are going to emphasize the said program. So first is that since teachers are very vital in students' learning and social media platforms are now considered to be the um, new domain of learning, teachers, facilitators, and mentors should integrate social media platforms to the learning of the students. So social media platforms should be involved in the students' learning, most especially now that browsing social media or using social media accounts are already part of our everyday life. Moreover, school head, school administrators should initiate a professional learning community as well. So, professional learning communities or PLC will help teachers to work together in order for them to strategize, plan, and create a creative and very intensive materials for the learning of the students. And lastly, since social media platforms nowadays are found to have drawbacks, especially with the students' mental, emotional, and physical health, um, their parents' guidance is or should be considered while undergoing this kind of program. And also to prevent the exorbitant use of these platforms in a negative way and to appreciate the good points of these social media platforms to the learning of the students. So that would be the end of our discussion regarding our presentation for this afternoon. But before I officially end this discussion, let me leave you with this quotation. So, without grammar, very little can be conveyed. Without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. Learning new vocabulary words through exposure and use of social media sites can help individuals expand their vocabulary. So, this is from Wilkins, 1972. And thank you so much. So I hope you have learned so much from this presentation. And if you happen to have questions with regards to the results or the course of the study, you may ask us through the comment section or the chat box. Thank you so much.